to value. Value is how we start to get at things we can do in a drawing, especially a painting, to really bring it to life. So what do we mean by value in art? We mean it is the visible lightness or darkness of a color. And we use it to create the effect of light and shadow, as it says here, in our drawings and paintings. And you could argue that you do it because it just jazzes up that drawing. It makes it more interesting to look at. It makes it cool. I can make it look realistic. And that can be something that you want to do in your artwork. So here's an example of a grayscale, of taking it from the darkest dark in terms of just black to white and having all these gradations slowly stepping down from the darkest dark to our white value. Okay. So where does this come from? Just a little bit of a background. So in the Renaissance, artists wanted to figure out how to make their drawings more lifelike. So they came up with this technique that we call shading sometimes, but it's really about adding value to a drawing to bring it to life. And Da Vinci is one of the first ones to do that. In Italian, we call it chiaroscuro. So here's another artist that is doing it, almost 100 years now, but, a little bit further along that timeline than Da Vinci, but he has a wonderful use of value in his artwork as well. These are drawn by hand in pencil. So let's jump to color. So color is a big one, right? Who doesn't love color? We love color, we love to work with it, but we're going to explore it a little more deeply here and starting to understand the choices you have and that artists have done in the past to manipulate color to get a certain effect. So how do we define it officially? Technically, in terms of science, it's the visible spectrum of light. It's produced when light strikes an object, and the only color that's bounced off that object is the one that is not absorbed into the object, right? That's kind of getting technical. But for our purposes, we're going to look at the three parts to color. The first part is hue, and that's just the color itself, our visible color spectrum, pure color. Then we have value, which is going to connect back to what we just looked at. So value is about the brightness, or this should say darkness too, of a hue. So, and it ranges from black to white. So I want to make sure that we all understand something about value and color. Let's take this blue that's right here. This blue is yanked from the color spectrum, lives right about in here, right? And then what's happened here is we have increasingly added black to the color to make it darker. Then we have added white to increase its value, to make it lighter. This does not change the color. So when we're talking about color, and you pick, for instance, a red, and you add white to it, and you say, I've made pink, I've made a different color. You have not actually changed the color, you've only changed the value of the color you started with. That's an important difference to remember when we start painting. So then chroma and intensity is another way you can play with color. And this is kind of the long definition, but what it really means is I'm taking a color from the color spectrum, I'm just kind of choosing my pure color up here, and then I'm actually changing the intensity of the color by adding gray to it. And it mutes the color. We call these tones, actually. The actual name for what's happening to this color, and if I would say here's a tone of red. I wouldn't say this is some weird, I don't even know what you'd call that color. Make up a name for me, guys. But that's another way we play with color, is making a tone of the original bright red color or hue that I was working with up here. So then in terms of how we choose colors to work with in a work of art, there is the arrangement of color around a color wheel, right? So they are arranged by separating out the primaries. Here are our primaries. And then between each primary color is the secondary. So I have to mix red with yellow to get orange. That's something that hopefully we all have been taught at some point or remember. Okay? And then we have the secondary colors, of course, which are these, and then the tertiary are the ones that are in between a primary and a secondary. Then we get down to actual choices of, I'm going to work with these colors in this painting. That's called a color scheme. So we have color schemes of monochromatic, which is just one color and then you make it lighter or darker. Then we have complementary, which is this one. They're directly opposite each other. We have analogous. They're right next to each other on the color wheel. Then we have triadic, three equally distant separated colors around the color wheel. So guess what that actually is? That actually is our primary colors is a triad. That's why you put these three colors together. They're successful and pleasing, and they always work together is because they're a triad. And then the same goes for our secondary colors or any three tertiary colors. They will work well together. And then of course we have warm colors and cool colors. The color schemes really can help you if you're not sure how to choose color to be successful. You know if you're working with one of these color scheme ideas and you go to the color wheel and pick out which ones you want that fit into these color schemes, you're going to be successful in terms of your use of color. So then we're just going to look at a few examples of that. So here's painters who, this color scheme is obviously full spectrum. It's basically almost the full color wheel with but there's a heavy reliance actually on kind of blues, greens, and oranges actually, which is a successful pairing. And then this one is actually interested because it's a bit more selective. So we have, overall, I would say this is a very warm painting, a warm color scheme, but we also have this wonderful dynamic of the complementary colors of red and green. So that really helps kind of make it pop. All right, so then we move on from color to our final element of art, which is texture. Texture, of course, is in real life quite simple, really. It's how something feels. So I could hand you a faux piece of fur like this and say, how does this feel? You tell me how it feels, run your fingers along it, that's that. Well, then in art, there's another aspect to texture. It's what we call implied texture. It means that we're basically faking it. We're trying to make that flat piece of paper with whatever material we're working with look like how it feels. That can be a really fun challenge. All right, so then moving on from the definitions, just here's a couple of examples of that. And we have this painting with lots of textures happening in the hair and the face and even the wrinkles of his face that are really quite beautifully done. And then in this still life painting, we have lots of different kinds of objects and textures, and each one has been dealt with really masterfully. We have the fabric happening, we have metal, we have glass, we have the lemon with the peel, and then the olives, and then kind of the food that's sitting over here, and the bread. These were done hundreds of years ago, so when you really look at these, hopefully you may not really love what they are of, but if you can look at them and appreciate how masterfully done they are in terms of the artist capturing the textures of these different objects, that can be really, really enlightening, and you can really appreciate the achievement of that artist. So we're going to end this here, and then you're going to do a review of these elements of art for me. And just make sure that you understand these definitions clearly, you can define them, and you can really use this vocabulary well when you're talking about your own work, somebody else's in class, or a masterpiece, something we look at in class. All right, guys, have a good one and good luck.